I was a chaplain for a year in the psych ward at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Southeast Washington, D.C. And I spent a year there working with folks, walking through dark days of their lives. And I don't talk a lot about the people, specifically privacy laws, and I don't want to fetishize crazy any more than it already is. The stigma doesn't need any help from me. But I do want to offer what I learned there in the discomfort and the stress and the dis-ease of working in those dark times, working with folks who seem to be so different from me. So I want to offer that being a chaplain, you learn two things. If you can do these two things, you got it made. Something called ministry of presence and something called use of self. So ministry of presence is the idea that we don't have to have necessarily the right words to say to someone, to be able to do the right thing. I used to be really worried when I was walking into the darkest moments of someone's life that I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. How can I speak to that grief, that loss, that sorrow in hospital rooms, in funeral homes, at bedsides? Ministry of presence is the idea that maybe you don't need to think about rightness or wrongness at all. That maybe just being there, really being there for someone is enough. That you don't need fancy words or fancy actions. That just to let folks know that they are not alone. That you are there with them, present in that moment. That's a powerful statement on the power of presence and the power of being. So that's really important to me. And that's why things that can happen at Thanksgiving, the divisive nature of our country is so gut-wrenching to me these days. Because I'm a people person, right? I believe in being present to people. And I hate the discomfort and the dis-ease and the unsureness that happens when I meet a new person now. When I'm going to Thanksgiving dinner. Because I don't know what's going to happen. And that discomfort is soul-wrenching, right? And part of this, of course, is being a white person in America. Comfort and privilege is the most important thing, right? Keeping the status quo, not rocking the boat. That's part of the system. But the other part is that I believe that we can only truly be fully human when we're in a relationship, when we're together with someone, that we're not made to go it alone. So where we are now is so hard because it goes against my instincts as a minister and as a human. And it's hard. So that's why the second part of chaplaincy, apart from ministry of presence, is something called use of self, which is an overly complex way of saying that I can see myself in the other. I can see me in you. It's the ability to encounter another human being and to say, I can see commonality here. I can see our hopes together. I can see my struggle and your struggle. I can see my dreams and your dreams. It's the courage to not only be in the same space as someone, so you can be in the same space as someone, but not be fully present to them, right? So it's the courage to really be there with someone, radically present, to be together. But how? Especially when the other that you're trying to see yourself in is so other, right? So I found this, how do I find something in common with a schizophrenic woman? Or with a man who's nonverbal in a coma? Or, to make it plain, how do I find something in common with my racist uncle who comes to Thanksgiving wearing a Confederate flag t-shirt and thinks that I'm racist for saying Black Lives Matter? How do we find something in common? Use of self has kind of a continuum aspect to it, right? The very first part of use of self is something called the instrumental level of use of self, right? And it's predicated that when you enter into an encounter with someone, the goal or the outcome of that encounter is simply, what can I get out of this, right? If it's a dinner party, if it's a conversation at a bar, you're not really thinking about anything else other than, okay, what can I get out of this, right? Can I get away from this conversation because it's freaking me out? Can I contribute something to this conversation that's going to make me feel good or feel smart? For an example, at Thanksgiving, can I argue with my uncle's All Lives Matter take? And why am I doing it? Am I trying to beat him in this verbal argument? Or is there something else going on? That's instrumental use of self. And I want to tell you that when we do that, and we do it a lot, I do it a lot, we're not treating that person as a person. We're treating them as an instrument, an object. It's an object that we find boring, or infuriating, or mildly interesting. But in those moments, it's the stuff that we have to say that gives the encounter meaning. So have you ever felt this way when talking to someone? They're not really listening. They're just waiting to pounce with what they have to say, right? Have you ever been the person waiting to pounce? Yeah, I have. I know I have. So when you interact with this person on this instrumental level, it's what Henry Nouwen, famous pastoral care theologian, called the I-it relationship. There's the I, the ego, the self, capital S, and the it, the instrument, the object. Not a person with full humanity and autonomy, but something that is just there. So the I is the relationship we have with most things, like the raisin, like the bread. It's the relationship we have with most people, to be honest, because we can't get to know everyone on a soul level all the time, right? Especially if we're walking in a crowd or something. It is the default for a lot of us. But it is the default for every human being, for the racist, for the sexist, for the toxic people who look at anyone different from themselves. They see the world only in terms of its. It's that they can either control or it's that scare them. So if the world is built on fear and anger, when those its start to fight back against their oppression, you can see the results. I think that's why we've gotten to where we are. So I'm asking you to move to this next level use of self, right? Something called the transpersonalist, to see yourself in them. To see yourself, capital S, to find commonality with those people, to move from the I, it, to something deeper, something holier, something more sacred. But how, right? So for me, make it plain. I believe it's theological, right? I believe that it is a spiritual practice to do this. It's got to be more than just a discussion about their labels or the surface things that you can see about someone, right? It has to come from somewhere deeper to be able to really see yourself in the other. To move from the I, it, to something called the I, thou. Thou, like the old school word for you. Henry Nouwen talks about moving from I, it to I, thou requires to see the other as a full human being. He calls it a bearer of the divine image. To see someone whose divinity and humanity is reflected in you, someone who has a divine spark. The only way to do this is to have a ministry of presence. To be present, not just in the same space, and to look for this commonality, to see the other person as a full human, the way that you see yourself as a full human. Right? I know sometimes I think I'm so complex and got a lot of things going on, but other people are simple. But that's not true, right? So to see someone as part of the divine image, to see someone as part of the interconnected web of all existence, to see someone as inherently worthy and dignity, that is theological. Those are spiritual values that need to be lived out loud. So, when I come into this encounter, if I am unwilling to invoke something deeper, if I'm only willing to see someone as a label, as a voting choice, as an ethnicity, if I'm unwilling to go deeper than to see someone and label them as a supporter of a racist and fascist president, is simply label them as other, capital O. If I can't see the divine spark, the thou, in them, especially if they're a member of my own family and we're breaking bread together, am I really that different from a bigot, from a racist? If I'm unwilling to find any commonality whatsoever, how am I different, after all? When I was at St. Elizabeth's, that was the first thing I learned, that to get rid of this separation between me and them, I and you. I learned that there is no difference between me and a patient, between me and my racist uncle. Because seeing others as its, as not worthy of your respect or your time, is easy. It's comfortable. It's why so many people do it. It's so easy to complain about one block, liberals, Republicans, as if they're lesser than, different than. I do it all the time. And it's not to say that we shouldn't hold people to account. That's not what I'm saying. It's not that we shouldn't get involved, maybe cause a little good kind of trouble, maybe cause a ruckus to make those people pay attention, to say, hey, that's not okay. But what's at the core of that? Is it about trying to beat this other person? Trying to make them feel less than? Trying to make ourselves feel superior? Trying to make ourselves feel less guilty? Less culpable? I don't believe that is what our faith calls us to do. I think it calls us to demand justice. And that doesn't preclude arguing, fighting, even dying for radical love. I'm not saying we shouldn't argue, we shouldn't push back, but I firmly believe that our fight is with systems of oppression, with laws and ideologies, and not with human beings. That humans are the carriers of this disease, these isms, the sexism, the racism, the ableism, but these things are passed down and learned, especially if you're from where I'm from, right? I believe there's a spiritual element to this stuff that you got to reckon with. It didn't come out of nowhere, right? It's baked into the DNA of our country. It's baked into folks that look like me. But black and brown folks are not immune, right? It's everywhere. And it's especially baked into those folks who call me a bigot because they think I'm full of hatred for white people because I speak the truth. But I remember that they are human and that they are susceptible to that disease just like I was. But we made different choices. I had different opportunities, different privileges, different personalities. Maybe my brain works a little bit differently. Led me here, away from that racism, from that toxicity, towards love and light. And I'm not done trying to figure it out. I'm just like them, because I was just like them. So that's why I try to remember when I get into these heated discussions on Facebook, which never go anywhere, or at Thanksgiving tables, I have to remember that we are the same. I tell people this. We are the same. I am you and you are me. And at the core, at the soul, there is nothing different between you and me. There is nothing different, racist uncle, between you and me. And that is a profoundly disturbing theological thought and a very humbling theological truth. So the fact that I am sometimes unwilling to see beyond the I-it, unwilling to be present, to engage in this theological problem, this spiritual problem, means I need to find a spiritual answer. So for me, I turn to church, right? Love with a capital L. That's what we preach here. And it is hard. It's hard to engage in I-thou relationships whenever possible. So I try to practice, like this mindfulness thing, right? You keep doing it, and maybe it gets a little easier to really be present to someone, to be a minister of that presence. I try to model what it could look like to see myself in the other. Not so that I can change my racist uncle's mind. That would be a miracle. but I do it to change me. And I do it to model for others, for my little nephews and my cousins, and for the little ones of the world, what it could look like. That there's a different kind of way to be. To show them that I was like this and I've been transformed. And they might be too. Because they are good too. And they are broken too. That's the thing I try to remember in these conversations with the other. The people who don't vote like me, think like me. They are broken too. They are hurting too. They're scared and angry too. I've been scared and angry when the world didn't make sense and I've lashed out. I know what that feels like. And they don't even know they're doing it because their whole world is based on fear and anger. Everything isn't it. Everything is different, so everything is dangerous. They're terrified, and they need a spiritual answer too. So we come back to the ministry of presence, the use of self. I tell them, if we can recognize that we're not different, I'm not trying to tell you I'm better than, you are not less than, I am not less than. We just made different choices. If I can see the I in the thou, if I can have compassion rather than pity for those others. Part of compassion is giving folks what they deserve. And what people who I've labeled as other, if I sit across from the Thanksgiving table, what they deserve is not pity. For the patients in St. Elizabeth's, for the folks who are struggling with a changing world, they don't deserve pity. They deserve our attention, they deserve our challenge, and they deserve our love. They deserve the focus, like we did on Raisin. They deserve love and compassion, telling you, I see you, I'm here with you, I'm listening, and I don't agree. And I'm challenging you because you deserve it. And because some of that stuff that you got going on needs to get out of here. We need to hold it up to the light and see what comes through. Because you are good too. And you are broken too. Just like me. And you might be the one to show them that with your ministry of presence. You might be the only holy text someone ever reads. I was told that once. You might be the only holy text someone ever reads that affirms their full humanity, that affirms that they can be transformed. Ministry of presence. So in these days of anxiety, of victory, of joy, of uncertainty, I'm asking you to look for the thou. And it is hard. Because love with a capital L is hard. If it was easy, we'd all do it. This mindfulness practice, these meditations, these are tools that you can take with you, that you can practice if things get uncomfortable, if you need to take a moment to be recentered, to be regrounded, and keep from saying something that you might regret. To remember that the raisin that is passed through life you may know nothing about, the raisin that comes to you from where you know not, the only thing you get might be the small glimpse. You can't understand why someone would think that way, would say something like that. You have to remember that raisin has come from a long way away. Deserves your challenge, your attention, and your love. Deserves your focus, and deserves to have the hell loved out of it. I wear a wristband every day. It says, be good to people. It starts with you. Be good to people. It starts with you. And I like that. Be good to people, yeah. And it starts with you. Right? So we can change the world, right, if it starts right here. Tikkun olam is a phrase in Hebrew, repair the world. But it also starts with you. The only way that you can be good to people, the only way that you can see yourself in the other, is if you are good to yourself. So take some of these mindfulness practices, be good to yourself, and be good to others this week and always. May that be so. Amen.